Hey, Mr. Coppola, congratulations on the movie.
Call me Francis.
Francis, congratulations. I would like to talk first of all. There has been a significant buzz here in Brazil about the news that the city of Curitiba and Brazil might have inspired some elements of Megalopolis. Is that true?
That's very true. In the course of doing research, I went to a number of places where I heard that there was the beginning of what could be called a sensible approach to modern living, otherwise known as utopia. Utopia meaning solving problems that don't need to be there, but our human talent can eradicate them. And one was in Brazil, not far from Sao Paulo, under a city called Curitiba, which knew it was going to grow a lot, and a committee of architects discussed what they could do. And one of the members, a young architect named Jaime Lerner, became the mayor of Curitiba and implemented these ideas. And I went to visit it and got to know Jaime Lerner, who was a wonderful man, ultimately became the governor of Paraná, and had made ideas come to life in Curitiba that were really utopian.
Great. And Francis, it feels like, as has happened other times in your career, that Megalopolis will be better understood after people watch it more than once. It requires a second visit. In this era of infantilized cinema, where everything is overly explained, was this an intention of yours to not make an obvious movie?
Well, definitely. The commercial cinema is based on a formula that has been sold to the public the same way that they sell a McDonald's hamburger or Coca-Cola. In other words, you have to know exactly what the recipe is so that the audience will be addicted to it. Whereas cinema, when it expands to a more ambitious idea, needs to help the audience enter correctly, because it's, as you know, cinema is an illusion, and when you see a movie, there is no emotion on the screen. It's all in the audience. So if the audience hasn't accepted the illusion, like a magic trick, if they know how you're doing the magic trick, they're not interested in it. But if they don't know how the illusion works, then they give their own emotion to the movie, and the acting is beautiful and the story is compelling, but only with the consent of the audience. So how you encourage them to enter the movie is one of the most challenging things a director can do, especially when you're changing the rules, like Apocalypse Now changed the rules. And when Apocalypse Now came out, there were people who said it was the worst picture they had ever seen and the best picture they'd ever seen, but they kept going to see it again and again, and eventually it changed what the rules were for that kind of movie. It's still, 40 years later, it's still is shown every year to great revenues. So Megalopolis is more like that film. It has its own rules, and the door it invites you into is to most audiences very small, not as clear as when you go see a movie that is all about you enjoying the movie and it making money. It's really a business decision.
Okay. And talking about the rise and fall of empires, there is a moment in Megalopolis where Lawrence Fishburne's character narrates, "An empire falls when society no longer believes in it."
When it's people no longer.
Yes, that's correct. And that contrasts with the first line from The Godfather, from Buonasera, "I believe in America." So that contrast begs the question, have you lost your hope in America and in society?
I have lost my hope for the traditional political apparatus to solve the problems, because like Rome was very successful. It had conquered half the world, and a lot of money flowed into Rome, but the money didn't get to the people. The money got to the Senate and enriched them, and the senators were more concerned in their work to preserve their power and privilege. The same thing has now happened in America. A lot of money in America. There's more money in America. America has most successfully defeated world inflation, so there's a ton of money in America. And the president, senators, and the politicians are more concerned with their own power and privilege than they are with governing the country. So the scenario duplicates how Rome lost its republic, and it could very well happen again.
All right. Francis, you are a critic of some aspects of the woke culture. Do you believe there's an undercover censorship surrounding the artistic class today?
I think there's no doubt that there's a misunderstanding as to the role of art. Art exists to illuminate contemporary life. In other words, art is there so people can see the world, see and understand the world they're living into. That's its only role. And of course the decisions people make will be their own, but the artist's need is to enable them to see what's at work. And I don't feel that we are seeing what's at work. I mean, there's a line in the movie which I would say to you, we're in need of a great debate about the future, and we need everyone in the world to take part in that debate, and no question should be omitted. That would be utopia. If we could talk like that, that would be utopia, because if we ask whether the society we're in is the only one available to us, of course we would say, no, we could improve it this way, and we could improve it that way. Maybe there shouldn't be so many commercials telling people that they're not all right the way they are. It would be better if they had a $100,000 car, which they'll never have. That basically, our entire structure is there to sell a little bit of happiness to people, and I think perhaps the people are being deliberately kept to be unhappy so they'll be better customers.
All right. Francis, The Godfather is one of those rare cases where the film is better than the book. I want to ask you, which book was harder to adapt into a movie? Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, Bram Stoker Dracula, or Mari Puzo's The Godfather?
Ooh, I've never been asked that. It's a good question. I didn't adapt. I didn't adapt Apocalypse Now. That was the work of John Milius, a brilliant screenwriter, and he and George Lucas came up with that script and did the successful adaptation. But I'll tell you, Orson Welles, as an old man, sat next to me and he always wanted to do Heart of Darkness, Welles. And he looked at me and he said, you did a great job of adapting Heart of Darkness in Apocalypse Now. But it wasn't to me that the compliment should go. It should be to George Lucas.
Okay.
And John Milius.
Milius.
Both of them, because they did it together.
Okay. And Francis, of course, you were part of the so-called New Hollywood movie movement that today is considered one of the most important in the history of cinema, is studied in universities. Do you think the movement is a little romanticized, or looking back, do you believe those guys really did something special in the history of cinema?
I think you have to understand that it was a unique time for one reason that I haven't heard discussed a lot. That the young people who made up that group, myself as the older one who was something of a gatherer, and the others, had two fantastic inspirations where there only had been one before. One was the great work of America's Hollywood and the tremendous work they did with directors like William Wyler and Fred Zinnemann and Louis Milestone and John Huston, many greats. What's his name? Anyway, there were so many. But at the same time, we had our eyes on the Japanese and the French and the Italian. So we had a view of Swedish cinema, French cinema, Italian cinema, Japanese cinema, Danish cinema, at the same time that we were looking at the Hollywood studio system. So it was such a powerful combination of personal style and Hollywood style that it gave birth to us. I mean, every one of those people, most famously, but not only Marty Scorsese, who was a student, a great student of both European and world cinema, comparative cinema, and Hollywood cinema. So it was the double whammy, so to speak, of both that I think inspired us.
All right, I believe I gotta wrap it up, Mr. Coppola.
You can ask another question.
One more, okay.
You don't have to listen.
Okay, one more then, thank you. About The Godfather, one last question. In my mind, the trilogy works as a complete piece of work.
Right, it's really two parts, part one and part two, and a coda,
Okay.
which is like an epilogue, and that's what the new third film is cut. It's called The Death of Michael Corleone Coda. It's not anymore Godfather Part 3.
Okay, but when you first start doing the first one, do you have a trilogy in your mind? Never had.
Absolutely not. I didn't even have in mind that I was going to survive the picture. I
Yes.
thought I was so sure I was going to get fired, and I had three kids at that point. So I mean, I was only concerned with whether I would have enough. I had no money. It's not like, people think the Coppola family is this dynasty, but I came to Hollywood. I couldn't even afford a car or a girlfriend. I had so little money. And then the rest is, of course, because of the tremendous luck of having such a success with The Godfather. That was a miracle.